Good afternoon. My name is Kareem Shishakli from IC Systems, and I'm pleased that Billy Schoenberg, our lead developer for Stella Professional, is here with us today to talk to us about how to do things that you're used to doing in iThink and Stella Professional.
Thanks, Kareem. Today's going to be all about Stella Professional, and what we're specifically trying to do today is kind of explain it in the context of iThink or Stella version 10. We want to make it clear that Stella Professional is a really powerful modeling tool that you can do to do many, if not all, of the tasks that you are capable of doing modeling-wise in Stella Professional. In iThink or Stella version 10. And then you can build useful models with it. So first, before we really get into the full content, let me just talk for a moment about the webinar mechanics. For those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, there's a grab tab in the upper left that allows you to hide and close the panel. You've got audio setup in case you're having trouble hearing me. If you ever at any time need to send a question, you can do that through the bottom of the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll be leaving plenty of time at the end of this webinar. I'm hoping about 15 minutes for questions, which we'll answer right here on the spot. Any questions that we don't get to with the time that we have allotted for Q&A, we'll make sure to answer via email, and we'll post those up on the site, as well as a recording of this webinar. So this is what I'd like to cover today over the next hour. So the first thing I want to do is get everybody up to speed on Stella Professional. I want you guys to know what it is, how it relates to iThink and Stella version 10, and then I'm going to just kind of go through, a full list of features, and I'm going to do it in the context of building the BAS diffusion model. So I want to show you guys data reporting mechanisms. I want to show you how you can do comparative graphs and tables and run filtering. I want to show you the new power that we've put into Stella Professional in this area. I want to show you a bit about data exporting to Excel and CSVs. I want to show you some of the cool new model debugging features that we have and model analysis features. So we allow you now to see all of your model errors at once. Makes it a lot easier to figure out syntax errors. We've got this cool feature that I've just kind of termed result scrubbing. You'll see what I'm talking about later, but it lets you, slice through your model time step by time step to kind of figure out what's going on. We've got a brand new results panel, which makes it very easy to see all of the data in your model on demand. We've got, of course, the new Stella Live, as well as fully up-to-date sensitivity analysis. We've got the ability to import data from Excel. And then I want to show you some cool model presentation bits, because one of the real focuses of Stella Professional is making it all look good and making it integrated within your already existing workflows, so that you can take your diagrams or your graphs and export them into PowerPoint or Word to build pretty presentations or reports. And of course, as in all IC webinars, we're leaving time at the end for Q&A, and I'm hoping to actually leave a little bit more time than we've done in the past. So let's get started here. So this is Stella Professional. And so let me give you the 30,000-foot overview here. Stella Professional is our rethink and redo of the interface for building models. So for those of you familiar with iThink and Stella version 10, this program encompasses the map layer, the model layer, and the equation layers of iThink or Stella version 10. So those of you who have been using our software for many years know that there's only a key few subtle differences between iThink and Stella version 10, relating to the icons, relating to some default settings. But besides that, the two pieces of software are directly interchangeable. Stella Professional is named Stella Professional because we've liked the Stella name. We're trying to bring that name to prominence, and can open up any model that you've created in iThink or Stella version 10. It uses the new XMile standard. So what I can do with Stella Professional is everything that I could have done before on the map, model, and equation layers. So let me show you now a bit about this new interface. So we've got a couple of toolbars. The first toolbar we've got here, this is what we call the build toolbar. This has, all of our stocks. And so it's real easy now to get to some of the hidden tools in the toolbar. You just hit the little down arrow and it shows you we've got all of our flows, we've got all of the different kinds of converters, connectors, modules. So Stella Professional has modules just like iThink or Stella version 10 does, as well as sectors. We can also do ghosts, cross-level, as well as normal. We've got the text box, the graphics frame, graphs, tables, and numeric displays. So that's the build toolbar. We've then got this new toolbar, and I'm just pulling it off here to kind of show one of the cool new features of Stella Professional, which is that your toolbars are reorganizable and dockable. And we've got what's called here the mode toolbar. This lets us switch between two states of the program called edit mode, where we build our models, and explore mode, where we view the results of our models. And we'll explore this in depth as we build that vast diffusion model. And then for those of you who are very familiar with iThink or Stella version 10, this is now how you switch between map view and model view. You've also got the same switcher here on the panel. The next toolbar I want to talk about is the run toolbar. This is on the bottom of the page, and this is what allows us to run our models quickly, get to the data manager, restore all devices. After we've run a run, it allows us to name runs. And this is that run scrubbing feature I was talking about. And we'll get into that as we build. But this is what's known as the run toolbar. Over here on the right is what we call the dockable panel, or the settings panel, or the properties panel. This has all of the settings that you need to control whatever item is currently selected. In this case, we've got nothing selected, so it shows us the model settings as well as the page settings. So here's where we can set up all of our run specs, start time, stop time, our DT, as well as whether or not we want to show page boundaries, or whether or not we want posters, or hiding the module prefix, or the number of page rows or page columns we want. So everything now, more or less, is in the panel. We've got a new panel called the results panel, and this panel shows us data for any variable that we've selected on the diagram. And go into this, as we build and explore the results out of our model. But this panel too is also dockable within our application. Finally, we've got also in the file menu a recent list of models, so that if you want to quickly see what you were working on last, it's right there. We've also have the ability to have multiple models open at once. So in the window menu, you see here there's one new model. I can have 3, 4, 5, 6, any number of models I want open at any single point in time. We still have a couple of dialogues. So for instance, things like the array editor and the unit editor and the data manager are all still dialogues. And this one here is new, this equation viewer. This is the equivalent of the old equations tab within iThink or Stella version 10. Alrighty, so let me put my interface back to default. So I personally like it like this. So I just set it up the way I want it. So let's get started building our vast diffusion model. So the first thing I want to do when building this model, and I'm going to go a bit quickly with this. My goal here isn't necessarily to teach people how to build models or any of the theory behind system dynamics. It's kind of just to demonstrate what Stella Professional is all about in the context of building a model. If you're interested in learning more about the theory behind building models, get in touch with us. We've got some old webinars where we do that, and we've also got new content that can help you get up to speed with building models. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just set up my run specs, and I want this model to start in 2010 and in 2015. And I want this model to have a DT of 1/64. The reason for having a more accurate DT in this case is because some of our delay times are pretty short. So we want to make sure that with the Euler method, we're not introducing high amounts of error. In this case, we want the model to run not over months, but years. All right, so now we've set up the run specs for this model. And we're going to want to start by actually building our structure. So I'm going to choose the stock tool. I just click once on it, Click once again, and I've placed it. And the first stock I want to put down is our potential customers. Forgot how to spell potential there for a second. Okay, so now we've put down our stock, and you'll see that I've got a little warning symbol here telling me that I haven't entered in an equation. I've also got, this is the error list. It tells me, what errors are currently existing in my model. But since I'm just building out the stock and flow diagram, I'm not really interested in what all of these errors are. So I'm just going to switch to the map view so that I can put together my stock and flow diagram without necessarily having to worry about the equations. So this is our stock of potential customers. Now let's put down our stock of actual customers. Okay, and I like to make my models pretty neat, and one of the cool, neat features that Stella Professional lets me do that are these guides. So as I drag around the stock, I'll get a little, dotted line which tells me how each element aligns to each other element on the screen. That way I know I've got everything, on a nice, pretty grid. So now let's drag out our flow. Let's make the adopters that are going to move people from the potential into the actuals. So I do that by clicking once on the flow, clicking and holding inside the potential stock. And I'm dragging right now with my fingers still down on the mouse until the cloud gets over the customer stock. And you'll notice the customer stock lights up. This lighting up is letting us know that we can release our finger and it will connect the flow to that stock. So now it's prompting me to enter in a name. So let's say, mistakenly I click out, and now I've got this flow 1 here. To edit a name is real simple. I just hover over it, click once, and now the name editor is back up here. So I can enter in adopters. All right. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to start adding in our converters. So we're going to start with entering in a variable that represents the initial customers, and a variable that represents the total market size, and a variable that represents the fraction of non-adopters, and we've got 2 inputs into this model. We've got the number of contacts, so how many people does everybody bump into during each year, as well as the adoption probability. What's the chance that that person that you bump into will actually adopt this new product? Okay, and we're missing now just a single variable, which is the adopters per customer per year. Now this is a very long variable, so rather than having, a very long line of text like that, I can just go back, move the cursor, hit enter to kind of wrap the text to the shape that I'd like to see. So now we've set up all of our variables, and we need to start connecting them together. We need to specify the relationships that exist between these variables. And to do that, we use the connector tool. So I press once on the connector, I press and hold on the market size, just kind of like I would with the flow, and I drag, keeping my finger down on the mouse until I hit a variable that I want to connect to, which will highlight in blue, just like with the flow, and I can release. If I want to adjust the shape of my connector, I can do that by grabbing the knob, pressing and holding, and dragging around.
I'm watching the webinar. So.
Sorry about that. I muted them. Okay. So now what we'd like to do is continue to draw the next set of connectors. We know that the number of contacts influences the adopters per customer per year, and same thing with the adoption probability. Now if I ever wanted to adjust what the angle of that connector looks like as I'm creating it is, I can go back till I'm close to the variable and get it straight. In Stella Professional, we've got a new feature which allows us to make connectors that have multiple anchor points. So I'm doing this using the Shift key. Every time I press the Shift key while I'm dragging out a connector, I add in an anchor point, and then I can press that anchor point to adjust the shape of the curve. In this case, I'm not very interested in having a crazy connector like that, so I'm just going to disconnect the connector from adopters by just grabbing the arrowhead and dropping it off and the connector goes away. And I'm just going to make a standard connector between fraction of non-adopters and adopters per customer per year. In this case, if I wanted to adjust where the name is relative to the symbol, I can press, hold, and drag, and I can move the name over to the side so it doesn't overlap the connector. Keeps things a bit neater. Let's draw the connector between potential and fraction of non-adopters. Yes. And the connector between adopters and adopters per customer per year. And our final connector over here. And I'll just make that like this. Okay. So now we've got all of our connectors hooked up. And it's time for us to start entering in equations. To do that, we go back to the model view. And now the handy error list tells us all of the equations that we haven't yet defined. So let's just start with potential. I select it right out of that invalid list, and it puts me right into the equation panel that I can use to start entering in equations. So our initial value for potential customers is going to be our market size. And in this case, I just started typing in the variable, and it suggests for me, hey, Billy, do you want the max function, or are you actually looking for the market size variable? In this case, I want the market size variable, so I hit enter. I then want to subtract from the market size the initial customers. And I can put the initial customers into this equation by hitting, if you're on the Mac, the Command key, if you're on Windows, the Control key, and dragging that variable off the diagram into the equation box. So again, what I did is I held the Command key, or for those of you on Windows, the Control key, press hold and started to drag. And you'll see here that my cursor is turned into a little converter symbol. I drag it over where I want to drop it, in this case the equation editor. And I get that little green plus that lets me know that if I release my mouse, it will drop in right there. Awesome. So now we've set up the equation for the potential customer stock. Let's enter in our units, since when building a model, dimensionality is a good thing to have. So the units for this model are going to be people. And let's set up now the initial value for customers, which is real simple. That's just initial customers. Let's set up the fraction of non-adopters now, and that's real easy. That's just our potential customers divided by the market size. So this is another way to put variables into the equation box by clicking them in the required inputs list. The reason why stocks don't have a required inputs list is because in iThink or Stella, you're not able to draw a connector from a converter into a stock. They're incompatible because stocks can't be influenced by anything over time. Alrighty, let's set up the next. We've got our units inside a fraction of non-adopters. So let's enter those in here. And those are going to be dimensionless. And the reason we know they're dimensionless is we know our market size is going to be measured in people, and our potential customers is measured in people. So let's go in and just enter in that market size, and we want 1 million people. So because I'm terrible at seeing, I enter in the commas, and then I remove the commas so that I know I've got 1 million. Okay, and now what we want to do is define the next equation, adopters per customer per year. So we multiply the number of contacts by the adoption probability, multiplied by the fraction of non-adopters. And you see, each time we fill out one of these equations, the number of invalid equations decreases. So now if we enter in the initial number of customers, which is going to be 1,000, and we know the units here are people, we've now only got 3 variables left to enter, which is the number of contacts, which is going to be 15, with the units of per year. So we bump into 15 people per year, with an adoption probability of 25%. Which is dimensionless. And we've got one final equation to set up, which is our adopters, which is just going to be customers multiplied by adopters per customer per year. And now that we've set everything up, this error list switches from errors, syntax errors, to unit errors. It lets us know, hey, Billy, you haven't defined, units for adopters per customer per year. So, let's imagine for a second we didn't know what this unit should be. We can ask Stella Professional to suggest to us what the proper unit should be by clicking that down arrow and hitting Suggest Units, and it says, hey, Billy, the units for this based on the equation are per year. And now that we've filled that out, all of our unit errors are fixed, and we've got what should be a runnable model. So before I run it, I'm just going to save it. That way I don't lose any of my work. And I'm just going to save it here as BAS. Alrighty. And let's go ahead and run this model. And I'm just going to do it right here from the Run toolbar. So now we're looking at results over time for our model. We can see here that we've got spark lines in our stock and flow structure that kind of help us couch the behavior of the model within the structure of the model. And if we zoom in, we actually get real graphs that show us the values here, but that's not the best way or even the easiest way to view results in Stella Professional. Let's start by using some of the output devices. So let's put down a graph real quick, and let's move it over here. And oh, I'm zoomed out pretty far. Let's go in a little bit. Alrighty. So let's put in this graph the variables customers and the variable potential customers. So the way that I'm going to add variables into this graph, I'm going to show you all the different ways that you can do that. The first and easiest is by hitting the Command key and dragging the variable from the diagram over the output device and releasing. It puts the variable right there, right in the graph, and you'll notice here in the series list it's been added. I could also do this by hitting Add a New Series, and it says, hey Billy, select a variable you want to plot data for. And I can just start typing into that list, and it narrows it down for me. And there we go. Now we've got our customers plotted against our potential customers. But right now I don't really love the look of this graph. So the first thing I don't like here is this x-axis. We've got a crazy number of decimals here, way more than we would ever need. So if we right-click over the graph and we choose Format, Time, we get this little dialog which allows us to adjust the precision of the axis. So in this case, I want 2 decimal places, and I want to display it as a number, and I don't want it to be scaled by anything. And now we've got a nice clean axis here. But still, the values here are a little uneven. It'd be really nice if we could add an extra label, which we can do here by going into the graph options and saying, give me 6 labels. And now that we've done that, we don't really need the additional, precision that we've got there. So let's just round everything off to 1. So now we've got a really nice, clean x-axis. And what I want to do is I want to move this legend from the right to the bottom. That way I give my graph a little bit more room. And in this case, I don't really like the dash dotted line for potential customers. So I choose potential from the list of series. And I say, rather than dash dot, give me a solid line. So now everything is plotted, the way I like it. If I wanted to, change what showed up in the legend here, so for potential, I could put, not yet customers, and the legend automatically adjusts, and it changes, what appears in the legend for this variable. I could change the min or the max if I was interested, or I could add, some thickness. Another new feature here with the graphs is I can actually plot different variables on different axes. In this case, it doesn't make the most sense in the world because both y-axes have the same scale. But if you're trying to plot things that have multiple scales on a single chart, using the right axis can be real helpful versus what version 10 would do, which is what we've termed multi-scaling. So multi-scaling puts the multiple scales all on a single axis. And also by default in Stella Professional, we round all the numbers off to be nice and even using the auto scale. But if you want to be very particular about what your scales are, you don't like the algorithm that the auto scaling is using, you can uncheck it and it'll change the values. So in this case, we're starting at 6.1 rather than 0. Let's just start at 0. Awesome. Alrighty, so now we've set up our graph. And let's start doing a little bit of debugging here. Let's try and figure out what the value is of adopters when we hit the inflection point in the customer's curve. So I'm just going to jump right back into Explore mode using the Explore mode toolbar item. And I'm just going to start by dragging this slider here at the bottom. And I'm just going to drag till we get right, a little bit. There we go, right until we get to the point where customers and not yet customers cross. And I can see here that my adopters are 936,000 in exactly year 2012, which is about right when things cross. So you'll see here that as I slide this time slider here at the bottom, it changes for me what I'm seeing, and it's just kind of slicing through the results of the run, showing me the value of every variable at that point in time. So this could be real useful if I'm trying to debug, when my model, went off the rails. If for instance I had a divide by 0 error, just what the heck was happening, in a particular point in time. Alrighty, so now let's talk a little bit about Stella Live. So what I can do here is I can take one of these knobs and I can just start spinning it. And what it's doing here is as I change this variable, it's actually running a new simulation for each value that is being generated and plotting those results automatically in my output device. So it's saying, as the number of contacts varies, I can change when the inflection point or when we get past the point of saturation between potential and actual customers. I could play with the adoption probability, which does a lot of the same thing. I could play, with the initial customers. I can play with market size, which changes, the height of that curve. And if I wanted to, I can just click on the knob to reset, to reset, to reset, to reset. Or if I wanted to enter in a very specific value, like let's say I wanted the adoption probability to be 0.275, I can right-click and go to this View Results panel, which is that results panel that I was showing before, and I can say rather than 0.25, I want 0.275, and submit that, and now I've got the exact value right there into the model. Okay, so now let's talk about how we can get some of this data from the simulation out into Excel to do further analysis with, to build reports, to put into presentations, things like that. So to do that, we've got this cool feature called exporting data. So we go to Model, Export Data, and we add a new export link. And we choose a destination for this exported data, and we're going to say we're going to export the data to this worksheet called Output. And this link is now enabled and dynamic. Dynamic means that every time the model resimulates, the data will be re-exported to Excel. In that case, I'm not very interested in that for the moment, so I'm just going to disable it. I can choose, what data source I'm exporting. I can export, in this case, all model variables or parameter values. Or if I had tables placed in the model, I could choose a table that I wanted to export data from. I can choose the orientation that I want the data in when it's exported, as well as the interval that I want the data exported at. So right now, if we choose every DT, it's going to do it, one row for every time step. Or I can enter in an interval of 1, or if I was using a table, using table settings. In this case, I just want every DT. And I can right now hit this export button, And it'll export the data right there on demand, right into Excel. And if I pop open that sheet, we get all of the data right there. So this is literally every single simulation result from the model right here in an Excel workbook, which I can then take and do more work with later. And again, dynamic, make sure that this happens every time that we run the model. So that means if there's a particular output graph that we don't have that you want to display data in, and Excel does have it, you actually set up that graph in Excel, run the model in Stella Professional, and watch as the graph updates within Excel. But getting back into graphs, let's talk a bit more about that. So we've got the line chart, we've got a scatter chart, we've got a bar chart. One of the neat things about these graphs is we can switch between them, and it will automatically save the settings that we that we already had. So one of the old frustrations in iThink and Stella was that whenever I changed the graph type, it got rid of any setup that I had already done. Alrighty. So now let's go and actually make this into a comparative graph. Let's take a look at comparative customers over a list of runs. So when I check off comparative here, I've got two runs because I've run the model twice, once when I ran it and once when I did that Stella Live run. And so now I can choose what runs I want to be visible. So I can get to this from the panel or by right-clicking on the graph and hitting Change Displayed Run. So I call this run filtering. I could say, you know what, run 1 is really boring, so let's just take that right off the graph. And now the only thing I can see is run 2. Let's put run 1 back on the graph, but let's not put the next run on the graph. This is the equivalent of locking a graph like you would in Stella or iThink version 10. So now I run the model again, and nothing new comes onto this graph. But I can always go back to Change Displayed Runs and choose Next Run. And now run 4 is back on this graph. And if at any point in time I want to put run 3 back on, I can just check it, and it goes right there, right on the chart. All right. So now let's go ahead and let's clear all the data out. And we do that by hitting Restore All Data. And we've got this data is still in here because I've specifically asked for it to stay. So I'm just going to uncheck all that, and it'll go away. And let's talk about how we can get data into the simulation. So let's run it once, and let's call this run the base scenario. All right, so we got to this little dialog by just clicking on the legend item, and it gives us the ability to rename the run. So in this case, we want it to be the base scenario. And let's save our work. Let's go back to edit mode. And let's go to this new panel over here called the parameter control panel. And what we're going to want to do here is, since we want to just experiment with changing multiple parameters at once without actually changing the values in the equation, we're actually going to generate an import sheet which will change the values of those variables without overwriting them within the equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate an import template. And we'll choose that input sheet that I've already created here. And we hit OK, and it says the import template generation executed without issue. Very formal message. If we pull it up here, what it's done for us is it's made us a sheet, a template that we can use to import data into Stella Professional that has all of the current values for the parameters in our model. So let's say we wanted to test, an adoption probability of 0.45 when we had initially 2,300 customers. Let's leave the market size alone, and let's say we only bump into, 13 people each time period. I can save that, come back into Stella Professional, drag this sheet from the available parameter control sheets into the active, confirm, and rerun, and now I get a different set of results. So this is with that sheet imported. And so you'll see here that I get these little X's over the variables which I have imported data for. If I was interested in actually having this worksheet or the values in this worksheet override my model equations, I could go to Model, Import Data, and set up an import link just like we set up the export link. Using the Model Imports dialog will overwrite values and equations, whereas using the Parameter Control panel will just control the values of variables rather than overwriting them in equations. Alrighty, so let's take away this sheet here and confirm it. Alrighty. Now, let's do some sensitivity analysis. So let's see, how is this model sensitive to the number of contacts and the adoption probability? So I'm going to restore all devices again. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sensitivity panel. And we're going to add a sensitivity parameter. And the first parameter that we're going to vary is the number of contacts. And we're going to vary it using a, let's do a normal distribution. Let's say the mean of the number of contacts is 10. The standard deviation is 2. Let's add another variable that we're going to vary over the course of the simulation, which is going to be the adoption probability. Let's do that using a normal distribution as well. Let's say the mean of that is 0.25 and the standard deviation is 5%. And so now we've got two options up here as to how we want to do this sensitivity analysis. Do we want to run the model, 5 times, pulling random draws from these two distributions, yielding us 5 total runs? Or do we want to run all possible combinations of these two parameters? So when we choose all possible combinations, we get this new input called number of samples. So this says it's going to draw 4 times from this normal distribution and 4 times from this distribution, and it's going to run every possible combination, 16, of those values. In this case, this is what I'm looking for. I confirm it by hitting the check, and now I get this little SRun button in my run toolbar. So I hit SRun, I run it right there automatically, it runs it blazingly fast. And what I want to do here is I just want to make the graph a bit bigger. So here now we can see how the customer's curve responds over the course of those 16 runs. And if I was interested at looking point values at any point in time here, I press and hold on the graph, and it gives me this little bar which shows me where on the x-axis I'm looking, and in the legend it plots out all of the y values at that exact point in time. So at this point, I'm going to save this model. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open it up in Stella version 10. So like I was saying in the beginning, Stella Professional is all about the model, the map, and the equation layers of the old iThink or Stella version 10. We're working on a new product called Stella Designer, which is going to allow us to build new modern HTML5 interfaces for models that come out of Stella Professional or iThink or Stella version 10. But we're not done with that yet, and we're not ready. So in the meantime, people still need to build interfaces on top of their models. So I'm just going to pop open iThink here, and I'm going to show you how you can take a model from Stella Professional. And you can see here that I've got that model. It's exactly as we just built it with all of the runs that we just ran, all 16 of them. And I can go up to the interface layer, and I can start building my interface. I can say, number of contacts, and just the way that you're used to in the past. I could save this, open it back up in Stella Professional, keep working on my model, go back to iThink, keep building the interface, save it, go back to Stella Professional. The two pieces of software are fundamentally compatible. There are some cases where they aren't exactly compatible, but for, I'd say 95% of the use cases that we've encountered, we preserve your constructs very, very well. This means you can do your modeling work in Stella Professional, do your interface work in iThink, and proceed along as you always have in the past. Alrighty, so let's close this up here for a second, and let's open up Stella Professional again. And what I want to do real quick is I just want to show you a little causal loop diagram that I built of this fast diffusion model to show you that Stella Professional can be used to make some really nice causal loop diagrams. If you're interested in learning how to do that, I'll give you a link which shows you how a causal loop diagram like this was built. We've got some webinars in the past which go through it. But in this case, I'm just going to copy this causal loop diagram to the clipboard. I'm going to come right here to PowerPoint, and I'm going to paste it in. And you'll notice here that that this causal loop diagram is in my PowerPoint presentation. But what's real neat about this is I can actually resize it, and it keeps the fine, crisp, clear graphics that you're used to seeing in Stella Professional. This has wonderful benefits, for all of you who are building presentations around your models or building, papers which you're submitting to the System Dynamics review, where you want to put in nice, crisp, clean diagrams into your work, but you need to tweak them, post-process them in the final document. So for those of you who are technical, Stella Professional exports all of its graphics as vectors, which means they're resizable without encountering any rasterization effects. All right, so let's go back to that model that we were working on here. There it is, and you can see here that I'm able to open it and have both models open at once. I can switch between the active model over here in the window panel. And I want to show you a couple of more features, first of the graph and then of the diagram styling. So I'm going to double click the graph here. I'm going to go to this other panel, this style panel. And within this style panel, I can change the look and feel of what my graph is like. If I want my title to be, in this font, and I want it to be, freaking gigantic, I can do that. So what I can do here is that I can make my graphs look the way I want them to look. I can control the axis color, so let's say I wanted really black axes, or I just wasn't interested in axes at all. If I wanted to, put some grid lines down, I can come here and I can say in the grid options, let's have six grid lines. And you see here we've got the grid lines plotted right there. So you've got a lot of control over what your graphs and tables and everything can look like. And this style panel is also active on model elements. So I can select, in this case, these two stocks, open up the panel, and I'm able to set attributes on both of them. I can make both of these stocks red. I can make them have a different font size. I can call them out in any way, shape, or form. I can also do it to individual elements using the style panel. Or in the model styles pane, I can actually change everything all at once. I could say I want my default variable color to be a bit more orangey. Actually, let's go with purple, because that's going to clash with the red. There we go. And I can say, I don't like pink connectors. I want black connectors. And it'll change it all for you right there at once. And when I go to create my next connector, it's black. Now it's hard to see here, but it's black. Okay, and then again, I can take this, copy it to the clipboard. I can go back into PowerPoint. I can delete this thing out of here. I paste it, and it's the same vector graphic. And the same thing with my graph. So I can come back to Stella Professional. I can grab this. I can copy it. I put it right here into PowerPoint. And I've got that graph now right here as a vector. If I want to make it bigger or make it smaller, it still looks good, crisp, and clear. So at this point, I'd like to move on to questions. But right before I do that, I want to show you this little cheat sheet here. And this is something that we'll send out to all of those who are interested. I think we'll probably send it out to all of the attendees of today's webinar. And this cheat sheet here has all of the little tips and tricks for all of you who are used to using iThink or Stella version 10 for how you can get the most out of Stella Professional. It goes through things like building a stock and flow diagram, or dragging and dropping variables into graphs and tables, or what was the difference between edit and explore mode again? And it goes through all of that, how to build a causal loop diagram. So this is a really handy little sheet to keep right in front of you as you get used to using Stella Professional. So at this point, let's go back into questions. And Kareem, I believe, has recorded all of the questions here, and we'll start asking them to me.
Great, thank you, Billy. The first question is, well, the comment was they couldn't figure out how to create a user interface, so they're glad you showed them that. And the first question is, when will Stella Designer be available? And we don't have a specific date, but maybe you want to add something to that, Billy.
So we're working on it pretty heavily at the moment. It's my main priority. It's what's under constant development at the moment. We've got it up to the point where we can actually build interfaces internally, but it's definitely not polished to the point where we're comfortable yet sharing it externally. My hope, and what I think is a fairly realistic estimate, would be first quarter of 2016, definitely before next year's ISDC.
I'll second that. So there's some questions about sensitivity analysis. How many variables can be included in combination for sensitivity analysis? Is there any limit?
We don't provide an external limit on the number of sensitivity parameters. You could include as many as you want. Now, of course, you're going to hit computational limits of your device. If you're running 100,000 runs, because remember, everything here is multiplicative. If I've got 4 samples multiplied by 4 samples, I've got 16 runs. So if I were to, instance, make that 5 samples, I've now got 20 runs the sensitivity analysis tool needs to run. And so we've done, some experiments. We've run, mid to large size models, with 500 runs, and we're able to get through those pretty quickly. But once you start hitting cases, where you're running, I'd say tens of thousands of runs on a, anything but a very small model like this, I'd start thinking about ways of breaking up that sensitivity analysis into smaller portions so that you can explore the state space of your model without necessarily overwhelming the computational resources of your computer. So things that would help would be modern computers with faster processors, as well as computers with more RAM, and especially computers that are 64-bit. That way you can make use of all of that RAM.
Thank you, Billy. And another question on sensitivity analysis is, the 16 runs are listed by run number. How can I see the values associated with these 16 runs?
Alrighty, so that's real easy. I probably should have shown that to you. So if we do an S run right here, it just ran those 20 runs for me. And in the graph, you get this little S button. I can hit it right there, and it shows me a table of the values that have been varied and what their values were in each of the individual runs. I can export that right to the clipboard. I can come into Excel, and I can paste it. And now I know exactly what happened during each run, at least what all of my inputs were.
Thanks, Billy. A question about arrays. Have we changed how arrays are handled in Stella Professional versus 10?
No. For 99.9% of use cases, they're exactly the same. One of the cool new features, though, of Stella Professional when it comes to arrays, especially non-apply to all arrays, is a new equation editor that we've implemented for them. So I'm just going to quickly make an array variable here, 4x4, and we'll come over here and we'll say non-apply to all. And so this is what you're used to seeing in the past in iThink or Stella v10, this table that lists out the dimensions, so 10, 11, 12. But what if I wanted to enter in wide swaths of these variables at once? I can hit this little undock tool I can select these 6 cells. I can say, you know what, I want all of these to be equal to 56. I want these to be equal to 32. And I want these to be equal to 17. That way I don't have to type nearly as much, and the equation is all visible to me right there in one big screen. I hit OK. It's done. It's all entered in there for me, and I don't have to worry about fiddling around in this tight little table.
Great. Thank you, Billy. The next question is, there are questions about whether it can read older iThink models, and obviously can it write, you showed, but can it read those iThink models, those version 10 models, and what about version 9 models?
Okay, so anything that has an extension ITMX or STMX is openable without any issues by Stella Professional. This means any model produced using Stella version 10 or iThink version 10 is openable by Stella Professional with no issues. Now, models produced in older versions of iThink or Stella, version 9, version 8, so on and so forth, those are your ITM and STM models. They don't have the X at the end. Those first need to be opened up in iThink or Stella version 10, saved, and then they can be opened up in Stella Professional.
Thank you, Billy. Simple question, how do you get the results panel to show again?
The easiest way to do it for me, I like right-clicking. So I just right-click View Results. You can do it also by hitting Window, Open Results Panel. And I believe you can also do it when you're in Explore mode by hitting Alt-Click. So I can Alt-click on any variable, and it will change what's right there in the panel. But now, of course, that I've got the panel up, I don't need to hit Alt. I can just click along, and what's in that results panel will maintain. It's will be based on what's selected. And when I go back into edit mode here, the panel will remain docked because I've docked it, and I can change the way that I dock it. I tend to prefer docking it like this, so I've got the results in one tab, the properties in another. So I can take a look at customers. Oh, what was the results in the last run? That's what the results in the last run were.
And how did you make a distinction between those two ways of docking it again?
So first, let me undock it using a little button at the top. And when you hover it over here, you'll see, if there's a big gray box, that's where it's going to go. If I were to bring it lower here, you'll see that the properties panel kind of moves out of the way so that we could drop it in, or up here, or there we go, over there. And that's how you can tell where any panel will show up when it's docked.
Thank you. When is clicking on the green check mark in the panel required?
It's almost never required. In fact, it's never required. The only reason I did it when we were in the sensitivity analysis panel is I didn't want to have to click once on the canvas. So for instance, if I were to change this to 4 again, you see this is automatically at 16. If I were to hit SRun right now, it would actually give me 16 runs. But because we didn't have a sensitivity analysis set up before, this SRun button wasn't there. Therefore, I hit the checkbox so that the SRun button would show up. But you don't have to concern yourself with having to ever hit that green check mark. Just click out, click anywhere else, change the focus, and it will commit whatever your current change is to the model.
Yeah, the only time I actually use that check mark is if I had an error in an equation and I changed it and I want to know if it's correct before I leave. And then I'll hit the green check mark just to test it.
Oh, I got an error here. And it would tell it to me immediately, whereas if I clicked out, it wouldn't become immediately obvious. I'd have to know to look for the error symbol.
Okay.
Hit the check mark.
Can Stella Pro import? Great, thank you. Can Stella Pro import models from other vendor software?
No. So right now, Stella Professional supports XMile, the draft standard set up before or as the committee was initially forming. Stella Professional version 1.1, which will probably come out around the same time as Stella Designer, supports XMile as specified by the technical committee over at OASIS. We know there are vendors who are working on exporting to as well as importing from that format. So for any vendors who are able to export their models into the OASIS XMile standard, those vendors' models will be openable in Stella Professional.
So I'll just add, if your vendor isn't supporting that, you can ask them to support it. Someone asked whether Stella Professional and the Stella 10 features, by which I assume they mean the interface, whether they can be combined into one software program, and you alluded to that, but maybe a little more.
Yeah, so talking about this future Stella Designer concept, that we talk about for Q1 of 2016, it'll be available in two ways. The first way will be as a standalone program. The second will be as a singular package called Stella Suite. Stella Suite will allow you to both build your models and build your interfaces in the same piece of software.
There's a question about pricing, but pricing's on the website, and it depends on what level you're at, whether you're a university faculty member, K-12, or none of the above. For example, researcher, commercial person, government person. There's different pricing, but that's all on our website. There's another question about how you draw the curve to make the graphics for a converter. They say they can't make it work like it was in version 10 on a Mac, but I'm not really sure what that's about.
May they be talking about a connector?
I'm guessing.
So in order to draw a arrow, a connector, what I do is I choose the connector tool. Let me do it again here. I choose the connector tool. I press and hold over the converter. While keeping my finger down on the mouse, I keep dragging around. And when I get to the item that I want to connect to, you'll see that it highlights, and I release my finger from the mouse, and it connects automatically for me. If I want to disconnect it, I can drag from the arrowhead, or if I want to change its shape, I can adjust the knob at the beginning of the connector.
Great, thank you. And I think that's the end of the questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you, Billy.
No problem. Hopefully I'll hear from you. Feel free to email support@icsystems.com with any questions or comments or concerns, and we'll make sure to get back to you as quickly as we can. Thanks again.